Hey guys, today I'll show you a zombie horror TV series named The Walking Dead Dead City Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a shot of the post-apocalyptic Manhattan in New York, which was once a bustling city, but it's now eerily lifeless. Manhattan Island was long ago cut off from the mainland, and the city is filled with the dead and denizens who have made New York City their own world. A lady named Maggie has been observing Manhattan Island from across the river for several days, her eyes glued to a massive horde of corpses slowly progressing along the riverbank. Unfolding a crumpled map, Maggie appears to be searching for someone important within this city. Suddenly, the low growl of a zombie breaks the silence. Maggie quickly hides, but a swollen zombie stumbles upon her. Caught off guard, she is pinned to the ground. In this dire moment, Maggie grabs her binoculars and smashes the zombie's bald head into a pulpy mess. Later, Maggie seeks information at a bar, lying to the bartender that her home has been overrun by zombies. On hearing this, the bartender mentions someone who's particularly skilled at dealing with zombies, suggesting they might be able to help. After the conversation, Maggie heads to the motel behind the bar. Judging by the items in one of the rooms, she's found the person she's been looking for. As she hears someone showering in the bathroom, two burly men suddenly appear. Caught by surprise, Maggie is taken back to the bar. The bar's owner had figured out that Maggie's intentions were not as simple as they seemed. Thinking Maggie was a spy sent by someone, she brandishes a pair of scissors intending to teach Maggie a lesson. But Maggie, being the warrior she is, easily gets the upper hand. Just as the situation escalates, a familiar face appears. It's Negan. But instead of greeting her, Negan flees away with a little girl, running fast like a chicken. Maggie quickly chases after them, shaking off a persistent thug before speeding off in her car. In the scuffle, she inadvertently drops her map book. Naturally, Negan can't outrun a car. Maggie slams on the brakes, blocking his and the little girl's path. Initially furious, Maggie presents Negan with a wanted poster after calming down. It turns out he's being pursued by the New Babylon police. Seeing his good-looking face on the photo, Negan laughs his beard off, asking if he could keep the wanted poster as a memento. Observing Negan's interaction with the little girl, Maggie curiously asks about his wife and child. Instead of answering, Negan introduces the little girl as Jinny, who is mute. Sensing Maggie is not here to take him to the police, he inquires if she has another purpose. Maggie confesses that a few weeks ago their hilltop fort was raided. They were outgunned, their food supplies stolen, and the raiders promised to return in a month. Indeed, a month later, the raiders not only took more food, but also kidnapped Maggie's son, Herschel, as a hostage. According to the clues Maggie has gathered, the raiders are now in Manhattan, led by a former savior named Croat. Negan dismisses this as not his problem until Maggie points out that Croat's whistleblowing manner is exactly like Negan's when he was with the Savior organization. Maggie is convinced Croat was once a member of the Saviors. Negan soon acknowledges this, but insists he's powerless to help, having left his leadership role years ago. Unfortunately, Croat was one of the most unhinged of his followers, making it unlikely that he could persuade Croat to release Maggie's son. In all the world, the last person Maggie wants to ask for help is Negan, but for the sake of her son, she has no choice. As for Negan, he has no reason to refuse. After all, he owes her. Realizing that the police will eventually trace him to the bar, he agrees to help, deciding that hiding out isn't a long-term solution. Afterwards, Maggie drove with Negan and Jinny towards the Hilltop Settlement, a place for the human survivors. They first settled Jinny in, then the two of them set off for Manhattan. Throughout the journey, Negan showed great care for Jinny. Maggie, finding it irritating, simply closed the car window. During a rest stop, Negan realized they weren't heading towards the hilltop. Indeed, they weren't, because Maggie had already moved the survivors to a new camp elsewhere. Over the past year, it seems everyone's circumstances had changed. Negan shared his own experiences. Roughly a year ago, he had fled to a farm where he met Jinny. Jinny had been living with her father on the farm until one day he left and never returned. By the time Jinny found him, he had turned into a zombie and got killed. From that day on, Jinny had not spoken a word. Negan, feeling sorry for her, had kept her by his side ever since. In the evening, 3 police officers arrived at the bar, searching for Negan. As the bar owner looked at Negan's wanted poster, she shook her head, indicating she didn't recognize him. According to the officers, Negan was responsible for 5 deaths, including a sheriff. Under New Babylon law, he was to be executed. The officers claimed Negan was a man who built his own kingdom out of greed. He once lined up a group of unarmed people, and in front of a pregnant woman, he beat her husband to death with a baseball bat. The man Negan had brutally killed was was Maggie's husband. This is why Maggie said that Negan owed her. The bar patrons remained tight-lipped, which wore down the officers' patience. They resorted to threats, taking the bar owner to the front of a horde of zombies. To save her life, she admitted that a woman had driven Negan away, but she didn't know where they went. With the lead gone cold, the officers angrily pushed the bar owner into the zombie horde, watching as her sexy body was torn apart. As they left the bar, the officers found the map book that Maggie had left behind. According to the index, they quickly identified the missing page, the map of Manhattan. After seeing the flare, the people from Maggie's new hilltop settlement came to pick up Jinny. During the night, Maggie had that recurring nightmare again. Upon waking up and seeing the now reformed Negan, her feelings were incredibly mixed. Negan shared with her that when he was a child, his father had traveled to Manhattan for work. Upon returning, his father brought him a little Statue of Liberty figurine. His father had promised to take him to see the actual Statue of Liberty, but they never made it. Now, being able to go to Manhattan was like fulfilling a childhood dream. Negan asked Maggie whether she had any other plans to save her son from Croat. She did, but she wasn't ready to share them yet. Seeing Maggie's distrust, Negan was somewhat annoyed. He told Maggie that now Jinny was safe, he had nothing to lose. He could kill her at any moment, but he knew she wouldn't kill him because she needed him to save her son. Negan was confident in his position, but Maggie was not unprepared. She gave him an ultimatum: either help her or she would report him to the police. In summary, only cooperation would lead to a win-win situation. The pair arrived at the riverside where Maggie had previously been hiding out. Across the river, a building was emitting billowing smoke. Maggie noticed that this occurred at set times in the morning and evening. She suspected there must be something significant behind this smoke. Just then, the police drove nearby. The officer in the passenger seat mentioned that before the disaster, Manhattan had a population of over 1 million. At the time, the military had bombed bridges and tunnels to eliminate zombies. However, the zombies weren't eradicated, and the entire Manhattan region fell, transforming into the desolate city of death that it is now. While the newbie officer was dumping his wastewater, Maggie seized him as a hostage. Then the three of them left the riverside in a small boat. Officer Newbie had been in service for less than 3 months and was not armed. The only thing he had on him was a bottle of medicine prepared for his grandmother. Negan found having him around troublesome and wanted to throw Newbie into the river. After all, they weren't far from the shore, and he could easily swim back. However, Maggie disagreed with him. She believed Newbie was a form of insurance. She wasn't afraid to provoke Negan and told him regardless of his thoughts. Upon hearing this, Negan lost his cool. Ever since they met, Maggie had been making him unhappy over various issues. He understood that the kidnapping of her son had caused Maggie to lose control of her emotions, and even the painful memories of the past began to torment her. But he couldn't bear it. After all these years, Maggie still saw him as a villain. In this zombie apocalypse, no one's hands were completely clean. Hadn't Maggie killed someone's father or husband too? In response to this question, Maggie said that if anyone else had done what Negan did in the past, they would feel the same as her. It's not something that you can just let go easily. The boat navigated through the floating corpses on the water's surface, steadily drawing nearer to the Manhattan City area. Upon landing, the zombies that had previously congregated there were nowhere to be found. Negan expressed a hope that once all was said and done, Maggie could help him take care of Jinny. However, Maggie thought this wasn't the time for such discussions, and sternly declared that he would never return to Jinny's side. Walking down the desolate streets, the eerie silence added an undercurrent of anxiety. Newbie attempted to seize the opportunity to escape, but was swiftly knocked to the ground by Negan. Maggie stepped forward to warn Newbie that he would face the consequences if he attempted to run for his shitty life again. The trio continued their journey. Suddenly, a fat zombie fell heavily from the sky, smashing onto the roof of a car. Startled by this unusual occurrence, Maggie rushed Negan and Newbie into hiding. The sounds of restless zombies could be heard from behind a glass door. It wouldn't be long before the horde would break through. Maggie pointed to scaffolding not far off, intending to take refuge there. But as expected, mishaps would occur. Newbie accidentally tripped over a piece of rebar on the ground, tumbling down. Thankfully, Negan pulled him to safety just in time, as fat zombies started to fall from the sky again. Atop a high-rise building, a white-haired figure was watching their every move. Once they had reached the scaffolding, the zombie rain abruptly stopped, but the mysterious figure disappeared into the night. The trio set off again, but they hadn't gone far when Negan noticed something amiss. The puddles on the road were bubbling like boiling water. He quickly urged Maggie to stop, pointing out a bell hanging on the wall, indicating a trap ahead. For safety, they decided to take a detour. As they continued, they found themselves in a dead-end alley filled with trash. Just then, a car playing music drove past them from behind, followed by a massive horde of zombies. Seeing this, they had no choice but to hide behind a pile of rubbish. Despite their efforts, a small group of zombies wandered over. The hiding group had to deal with the cockroaches, swatting them off their bodies. The sight of countless cockroaches pouring out was unbearable. They had no choice but to take a risk and run. But facing the incoming horde of zombies, they were at a loss. Suddenly, gunfire sounded from behind the horde. Luckily, Negan spotted an open side door in a nearby building. Without hesitation, the three of them dashed inside. Inside, they found themselves in a garment factory. The three of them split up to look for a safe exit. Negan and Newbie teamed up while Maggie went alone. Unexpectedly, the ones who had fired the guns and killed the zombies weren't strangers. They were two police officers. After shaking off the zombie horde, they also took refuge in the warehouse. Sensing the three of them hid there, the officers started to work on Maggie's mind. One of them introduced himself as the head officer Pearly and proceeded to share his background. But no matter what he said, Maggie remained hidden. Suddenly, a zombie jumped out. Pearly managed to take it down. Negan was thinking of moving Newbie to a different location when he was disrupted by another zombie. Poor Newbie was too slow to run and was knocked to the ground by the ugly zombie. Disgusting blood dripped onto Newbie's face. At a critical moment, Negan stepped in and helped Newbie out of the crisis, but their location was still exposed. Without a second word, Pearly fired his gun, accidentally shooting Newbie and ending his naive life. Soon after, the sound of gunfire attracted a horde of zombies who broke through the glass and flooded in. The other officer guarding the door was instantly besieged and became the zombies' midnight snack. At this point, only Pearly was left of the original three officers. Negan found an exit, but there were zombies there too. Pearly followed, aiming to shoot Negan, but he failed to notice that Maggie had approached him from behind. When she saw an opportunity, she attacked decisively. However, Pearly was professional too. Maggie's ambush failed, and the two engaged in wrestling their muscles. In the end, Maggie was subdued by Pearly. Maggie revealed her reason for taking Negan with her, but despite this, Pearly showed no intention of releasing her. In a split-second decision, Maggie pulled off her necklace and hit Pearly hard. With time pressing, Maggie didn't continue to attack. By this time, Negan had finally dealt with the zombies near the exit. The two of them quickly left. As for the unconscious Pearly, all that awaited him was the gnashing teeth of the zombies. The scene then shifts to Croat, the kidnapper of Herschel. Croat only said a few words to Herschel, revealing that he was a complete madman. In his eyes, Manhattan, filled with zombies, seemed more vibrant than before the disaster. Croat took out his torture tools to interrogate Herschel about what he knew about the man who killed his father. Just then, one of his men came to report that someone had escaped. The scene shifted to the rooftop, where a man, covered in wounds, was trying to escape Croat's clutches. Seeing him and his henchmen pursuing, the man still didn't stop running. From Croat's words, it could be inferred that the man, like Herschel, was a hostage captured from another community. To extract information, Croat had tortured the man severely. The man climbed to the highest point, aiming to escape via a zip line. The henchman tried to stop him, but Croat smiled and held him back, because everything was under his control. The man thought he had succeeded, but when he slid to the middle of the line, Croat decisively cut the rope with a pair of iron pliers. It seems that while Negan and Maggie are looking for Croat, Croat has also set his sights on Negan. This undoubtedly makes their rescue operation much more difficult. A direct confrontation between the two sides is imminent. On the other side, Negan and his team take shelter in a high-rise building where they encounter the mysterious old lady reminiscent of Einstein. She had been spying from the rooftop. Enemy or friend, it's too early to tell. The old lady blows out the match lit by Maggie and in the darkness steals her backpack. With zombies about to breach the door, Negan and Maggie locate the old lady's room, hoping to retrieve the backpack. However, she remains indifferent. The place will soon be unsafe, and the old lady ascends the towering staircase to the upper levels of the building. Negan and Maggie have no choice but to follow, with a swarm of zombies waiting for a meal beneath them. They must tread carefully with every step. The old lady, agile for her age, glides smoothly over a zip line between two buildings. She signals Negan and Maggie to follow, while the horde of zombies is closing in. Even if a trap lies ahead, they have no choice but to take the risk. Negan Negan goes first, showing his reliability. However, the unexpected strikes. Maggie halts before reaching the opposite building. Dozens of meters below, a sea of zombies awaits. Negan extends his hand to pull her across, but Maggie refuses assistance, finally swinging herself to the opposite building. Fortunately, there were no traps ahead. They find the old lady in a spacious room where she offers a pack of pigeon meat in exchange for some items from Maggie's backpack. Maggie, eager to save her son, doesn't want to waste any more time. However, savvy Negan observes the old lady's familiarity with the surroundings and asks if she can guide them to the smoking building. Due to a language barrier, Negan struggles to understand her response. After her explanation, the old lady gestures for them to follow. Suddenly, a man and a woman wielding guns burst out. They argue with the old lady, complaining about her habit of bringing back odd strangers like some kind of rag picker. Negan interrupts their quarrel, while Maggie lies, claiming they were headed for a settlement in Canada before a storm washed their boat ashore, forcing them to seek supplies. Awkwardly, Maggie's lie is exposed by a woman named Amaya. For safety, she signals a bald man, Tommaso, to confiscate Negan and Maggie's equipment. It turns out their refuge is within this building, shared with numerous other survivors. Tommaso tosses Maggie's backpack to a man named Luther, instructing him to inspect it thoroughly. Until confirmed safe, Maggie and Negan can only reside in a dingy, cramped bathroom. On the other side, Jinny safely arrived at the new hilltop. The residents were busy repairing the damaged walls, and children were attending classes which, apart from basic education, mostly taught survival skills for the post-apocalypse world. Jinny, being new, seemed particularly reserved. The girl in charge noted Jinny's nervousness and comforted her by saying that it was normal to feel out of place at first. In time, she assured the people here would become her family. Actually, the room where Jinny was staying was previously occupied by Herschel. The story then transitions to a flashback of Maggie and Herschel's daily life. One day, upon learning that her son had been skipping classes, Maggie immediately went to find him. She told him that training with weapons was vital, but Herschel had already skipped 3 classes. Herschel was somewhat resistant to Maggie's instruction. During their conversation, he was scribbling on a piece of paper. Maggie complimented his drawing, but Herschel crumpled up the paper and threw it on the floor before leaving the room. Back in the present, Negan calmly analyzed their situation. They were outnumbered and unarmed against armed opponents. If they fought back, they would surely be beaten badly. But Maggie was convinced that they could escape. Negan couldn't help but complain that if it weren't for Maggie's lie about seeking refuge in Canada, they wouldn't be in this mess. In Negan's view, honesty was the best approach, but it was too late for that now, and besides, it was unlikely that Maggie would have told her son's rescue mission to complete strangers. Since Negan had stressed the importance of information exchange, Maggie asked him why he had kept silent about Croat. Negan had no response and finally revealed more information. He had met Croat at the onset of the apocalypse. At that time, Croat had experienced many human tragedies. Negan took pity on him and allowed him to join the Saviors. Upon hearing this, Maggie sarcastically commented that it must have been a case of like attracts like. Negan didn't argue. Instead, he said that he only became a devil when it was absolutely necessary, such as when his saviors were in danger. However, Croat was different. He was good at reading people, liked to manipulate them, and then completely destroy them. Negan admitted that this was a useful skill in dangerous situations, but Croat had gone too far. During one operation, they encountered a girl trapped in a car. Negan saw no threat and intended to let her go, but Croat suspected her. The girl was coerced into confessing that she was a scout, but she died anyway. This incident made Negan realize that Croat was like a mad dog. To eliminate this threat, Negan decided to take matters into his own hands. Unfortunately, the plan failed. After a bullet grazed Croat's ear, he managed to escape from the Savior's camp. Since then, Negan hadn't seen Croat and was surprised to learn that he had been operating in Manhattan. Maggie was shocked by his story, knowing that Negan and Croat had been enemies for a long time. She realized that relying on him to persuade Croat to release her son was clearly not going to work. On the other side, Officer Pearly, who was thought to have died previously, was surprisingly still alive. After waking up from a coma, his companion had already turned into a zombie. The note in Pearly's hand had an address on it. After escaping from the building, he found an apartment block according to the address. The door to the room he was looking for was locked. Out of frustration, he pushed the door open gently. The room was eerily silent, and the thick dust indicated that nobody had been there for a long time. Pearly seemed familiar with the place. He found a wooden box in a drawer, but the handgun that was supposed to be inside was missing. Looking at a family photo in front of him, Pearly wore a heavy expression. Possibly they were all Pearly's family. Pearly found a body lying on a chair, picked up a cross from the floor and placed it on the body, hoping the soul would rest in peace. Just as Pearly was about to leave with the man's handgun, zombie growls came from outside the door. With a large hole in the door, zombies could climb in at any moment. Spotting this, Pearly opened a window and left the apartment via a ladder on the wall. However, as soon as he landed, he stepped into a trap and was caught in a net. Over at Amaya's side, a group of thugs had discovered their location. The survivors were packing up to evacuate. Tommaso released Negan and Maggie, but considering the invading thugs were likely Croat's men, neither wanted to leave. Negan told Tommaso they could help, but was refused. Negan swiftly grabbed Tommaso and held a weapon made of pigeon bone to Tommaso's neck. Of course, Negan didn't really intend to kill, he just wanted to earn trust and demonstrate his strength. After letting down his guard, Tommaso returned their gear. Meanwhile, a group of thugs wearing helmets and carrying steel rods broke in. They were fully equipped, and taking action rashly would be a losing game. Negan and Maggie had to hide while Tommaso and Amaya led the survivors to the rooftop. As Negan and Maggie went upstairs following the staircase, Tommaso was in a tense fight with a thug. Maggie wanted to help but was stopped by Amaya. Amaya then fired a crossbow and successfully hit the thug. Maggie walked over and stomped on the thug's neck, breaking it easily like cutting a piece of shit. Just as everyone retreated to the rooftop and prepared to leave using a zip line, another accident occurred. A thug who suddenly appeared grabbed the old lady. Negan tried to persuade him to let her dying body go, but the thug refused and stabbed the old lady. To prevent her from turning into an old zombie, Tommaso had to tearfully put a knife through her head. Negan grabbed the thug, but his companions were on the way. Negan told Maggie and the survivors to go first and he would handle things here. Negan took off the thug's helmet and brought him back to the building. His gaze became fierce, like the devil Negan was back. He kept banging the hostage's head against the glass to attract the thug's attention. Negan bluffed and stalled to buy more time for the others to escape. He didn't know that Maggie hadn't left, but had returned here like him. Facing Negan's strong presence, the thugs downstairs dared not act rashly. After making threats, Negan threw the hostage's body down. His crazy actions scared the thugs, who often took advantage of the weak. They didn't dare to come up. Maggie witnessed everything that just happened. She was obviously scared too. Negan didn't expect that Maggie would see this bloody scene. For a moment, Negan dared not look into Maggie's eyes and only awkwardly said they should leave. But when Negan came over, Maggie didn't say anything. Perhaps she had come to understand what Negan had said before, that sometimes he became a devil out of necessity, not because he truly wanted to do evil. After the crisis was resolved, Negan realized that his hand had been pierced by shards of glass. As he treated his wound, Luther, in charge of the Night Watch, observed him closely. Undoubtedly, Negan's bold actions that day had made a strong impression on Luther. The old lady's death had made the atmosphere a bit somber. Tommaso and Amaya thanked Negan, but due to the limited supplies, all of which had been robbed by the rioters, they didn't know how to repay Negan's kindness. Tommaso mentioned that the leader of the rioters was a madman with a missing ear, which made Maggie more certain that this man was Croat. As things stood, Maggie finally revealed the real purpose of her trip. After confirming Croat as a common enemy, Amaya suggested forming an alliance. There was strength in numbers, and neither Maggie nor Negan had a reason to refuse. In the night, the number of zombies gathered under the apartment building was increasing. Soon, the person setting up the trap appeared. It was indeed Croat. After rescuing Pearly from the trap, Croat kicked the gun out of his hand with a wicked grin. Croat's rescue was not out of kindness. They brought Pearly to the front of the zombie group separated by the barbed wire. What awaited Pearly was an even more dangerous challenge. Meanwhile, Jinny was worried about Negan, so after everyone fell asleep, she secretly left the new hilltop settlement, heading towards the perilous Manhattan alone. Along the way, she remembered the time she spent with Negan. At that time, Negan was always looking for a safe refuge for her. The two of them moved through the woods, where a zombie stuck in a tree caught Negan's attention. Negan recognized him as the man who tried to steal their supplies the night before. Just one night had passed, and he was already dead. Jinny told Negan she had lost her dinosaur toy, and Negan promised to help her find it. back to the present, where Jinny arrived at the riverbank on her mini motorcycle. The buildings on the other side of the river were in ruins. It was hard to imagine how horrific the situation was during the disaster. Jinny was a brave and resourceful girl. She found a plastic box and made it into a Tesla boat. She managed to cross the water and finally reach the other side. But the city was so big, finding Negan wasn't easy, especially with a million zombies and the more terrifying Croat. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Maggie and her group found a live deer. In the resource-deprived post-apocalyptic world, this was a rare sight. Amaya knocked on the deer's antlers to lure it over, and then Tommaso released an arrow with precision, sending the unfortunate deer to meet its deer ancestor. They then joyfully began to butcher the deer. While they worked, Amaya told Maggie and Negan their story with Croat. At the beginning of the disaster, they didn't flee the city but stayed, waiting for rescue. However, instead of help, the military failed to rescue the survivors in time, and to prevent the outflow of zombies, they destroyed all bridges and tunnels. The survivors trapped here could initially stick together for warmth until a man named Croat appeared. He offered food and safety, demanding that survivors join his organization. Those who disagreed were seen as dissidents and were hunted down. Amaya and Tommaso couldn't agree with Croat's pathological control and refused to join. Because of this, Croat had been causing them trouble. Hearing this reminded Maggie of Croat's actions in the hilltop settlement. She walked off alone, her breathing becoming rapid. The thought of her son Herschel being in Croat's hands made her sick. Most of the roads in Manhattan were off-limits. There was only one route to Croat's arena, but it was filled with zombies. Croat had people drive zombies there to create a natural barrier and prepare for the entertainment in the arena. Here comes the dilemma. How can they enter the arena alive? Maggie suggests taking the sewer route, but Amaya warns that the sewer is crawling with zombies. Tommaso, who was once captured by Croat, managed to escape due to knowledge of a secret passage. Maggie concocts another plan. Negan and Croat are archenemies, so if Negan can lure Croat out of the arena, she can kill him. Then they can certainly rescue Maggie's son. But Tommaso thinks this plan is too dangerous, afraid that they might not defeat Croat if he showed up. In that case, they'd be wiped out, and Herschel might already be dead. Maggie gets upset at this suggestion, and the atmosphere becomes tense. Negan tries to calm both of them down. Meanwhile, Pearly is brought to the arena by Croat. Along the way, he sees one of Croat's men stuffing a corpse into a plastic barrel filled with liquid, with visible bubbles slowly rising from the liquid. Pearly is then handcuffed in a room. Soon, a henchman walks in with food and drink and even starts playing music. Not long after, Croat appears. He tells Pearly that all the amenities he's enjoying are products of science. Before the catastrophe, Croat worked in the field of alternative energy. He chose Manhattan because of its greatest natural resource, the corpses. He then explains to Pearly why they put corpses in plastic bottles. The decomposition of bodies produces methane, which can be compressed into a liquid fuel at room temperature. The entire shelter relies on this technology for energy supply. Croat then takes out the handcuff key and asks Pearly why he's here and who he's with. As long as Pearly poses no threat, he'll set him free. But Pearly isn't a naive bunny and remains silent. While he remains silent, Croat begins to enjoy his meal. To his surprise, he cuts into the meat and finds a fat maggot. Croat gets agitated and he questions his servant about whether he checked the meat properly. The rotten meat breeds bacteria, and with the current level of medical technology, eating rotten meat could be fatal. The servant pleads innocence, claiming he's just a servant to deliver the food and has no right to inspect the food. Croat doesn't give his servant a chance to explain further. At this moment, he's worried about how to intimidate Pearly and decides to use his servant's life to do so. He stuffs the handcuff key into the servant's mouth, grabs his head, and smashes it against the railing. Then, he casually throws his servant from the high place like a fat bird. Witnessing Croat's brutal act, Pearly can't help but feel anxious. On the other side, Maggie pulls out a metal box, filled with what she considers her most treasured possessions. There are blurry photos of Maggie and her family, the pocket watch her father gave to her husband. At the very bottom is his portrait, drawn by their son Herschel. Negan interrupts Maggie's reverie. He's found a hat in a souvenir shop, one that looks similar to the one Herschel used to wear. He suggests that Maggie should give the hat to Herschel when they find him. Negan tells Maggie that he supports her rescue plan. Nevertheless, Maggie's face remains grim, as she still believes that Herschel's capture was due to her negligence. Her son is her most beloved family, and she messed up. Seeing Maggie once again sinking into deep guilt, Negan begins to share his own story, rather than use his muscles to comfort her. It's then revealed that a few years ago, he was living in a small cabin outside of New Babylon with his wife and child. One day, his wife went into the city to barter for supplies and ended up being robbed and beaten by a gang of 5. She didn't want Negan to do something reckless for revenge, but knowing his personality, it was inevitable. That night, Negan found the gang's hideout and sent them all to a more comfortable shelter in hell. As a result, Negan became a wanted man, and his family had to live in hiding, which was tough. For his family to lead a peaceful life, Negan instructed his wife to take the child and travel by Ferrari horse carriage to Missouri. He lied that he would follow them, but to ensure they weren't implicated, Negan didn't actually follow. Like Maggie, they all hope their families are still alive. Switching back to Jinny, she's truly brave. The streets are filled with zombies, yet she charges straight in. After an accidental fall, a zombie trapped under a box grabs her foot. Fortunately, she escapes unscathed, but the little dinosaur toy she and Negan had spent the whole day finding falls to the ground. Just as Jinny is about to retrieve the toy, a scavenger kills the zombie with a sharp stick and pockets the dinosaur. After the scavenger leaves, Jinny quietly follows behind. At dinner time, Maggie and the others gather around the dining table, placing mementos of their loved ones on it before they start to pray. The solemn atmosphere here contrasts with that of the arena, where the crowd is buzzing with excitement. The main event tonight is a battle between humans and zombies, with Pearly as the star. Croat asks him if he has any last words, but before Pearly can respond, Croat forcefully places a mask connected to a plastic barrel over Pearly's face. Breathing in copious amounts of methane, Pearly becomes dizzy. It's clear this is a grossly unfair fight. Not only is Pearly's consciousness blurred, his hands are cuffed to a pillar. Amid the cheers of the spectators, a zombie staggers towards him. Judging by its plaid shirt, it was one of the meal delivery guys. Pearly struggles to stay conscious, and as the zombie lunges at him, he counters first, strangling the zombie with his handcuffs. With all his strength, he rips off the zombie's head. This surprising turn of events leaves Croat somewhat stunned. The crowd isn't happy with the outcome, and they throw beer bottles into the arena. Thinking quickly, Pearly guts the zombie and retrieves a key from its insides. After unlocking his cuffs, he runs towards the exit, but the iron gate is locked shut. Worse yet, another batch of zombies is released. Outnumbered and unarmed, victory seems unlikely. So Pearly removes his right boot and braces for a fight. Surprisingly, the boot proves to be an effective weapon. He grabs hold of the zombies and targets their weak spots. Soon, all the zombies nearby are taken down by Pearly. Despite winning the match, Pearly is unaware that during the moment he took off his boot, Croat noticed something odd. Pearly initially intended to remove his left boot, but changed his mind. In a critical moment of life and death, Pearly hesitated. The only explanation is that something important is hidden in the left boot. Meanwhile, as Tommaso is chatting with Maggie, an old acquaintance shows up. It's the scavenger. He opens his bundle to show what he's found. Maggie spots Jinny's dinosaur toy. She asks where he found it. The scavenger mentions it was on the street and hands it over to Maggie upon realizing she knows the toy's owner. Pearly is locked in a room again. Croat tells him it's been a while since he's seen such an exciting match. Perhaps to distract Pearly, Croat starts telling his own stories. In the early days of turmoil, he and his family hid in a post office. He went out alone to find food, but when he returned, his wife and 3 children had been eaten by zombies. Just when he was about to leave this world in despair, he found Negan's Savior organization. After finishing his story, Croat orders his men to remove Pearly's left boot. As expected, it's stinky, but there's something inside. Hidden in the boot is the help letter written to Pearly from the man whose corpse Pearly found previously in the apartment. The content of the letter suggests the man was on the brink of collapse, hoping Pearly would rescue him. The anticipated result didn't occur, leaving Pearly living in guilt. The words in the letter weigh heavily on him. Compared to the fear brought by zombies, this emotional torment is even more lethal. Eventually, Pearly gives in. He tells Croat that he came with 2 companions who died along the way. His purpose in coming here was to arrest the fugitive Negan. Hearing Negan's name, Croat appears thoughtful. Even Negan is targeted by both the underworld and the law, but things are not looking up. Luther finds Negan and asks him to leave with Maggie tonight. Negan says that while Croat is a tough nut to crack, if they all work together, they have a chance of winning. The reason for Luther's sudden change of attitude is that he found Negan's wanted poster, which describes him as extremely violent, highly intelligent, and charming. Upon hearing this, Negan seems rather pleased. Faced with Luther's eviction order, Negan politely declines. He isn't going anywhere. The priority is to present a united front, not to foment internal strife. Both are adamant, neither willing to back down. After a brief standoff, Negan launches a surprise attack, slashing Luther's forehead with a peeler. After all these years, Negan has never failed in his swift and ruthless approach. Seeing Luther fall and not get up, Negan realizes he has no other choice but to finish what he started. Maggie secretly snuck outside, preparing to burn the dinosaur toy. If Negan found out that Jinny had already entered the city, he would likely go looking for Jinny instead of helping to rescue her son. Jinny, who was hiding nearby, saw everything. The scene shifts to Jinny's memories when she and Negan searched for a long time for the doll but found nothing. When they opened the zombie's backpack, they found the doll inside. Negan whistled twice. It was the whistle used by his first wife when she was too sick to get out of bed. But as long as the whistle was blown, no matter where Negan was or what he was doing, he would rush to her bedside. Negan and Jinny agreed that if he was not around, she just needed to whistle, and he would appear immediately. Apparently, in each other's eyes, they had become like family. The scene then flashes back to Negan's time in the Savior organization. At that time, a subordinate found Negan and told him they were in trouble. The troublemaker was none other than Croat, whom Negan highly valued. He had captured a girl and tortured her for information. In the end, he even crossed Negan's line by killing the girl. This incident became the catalyst for Negan to abandon Croat and part ways with him. Back in the present, Maggie and Amaya and the others decided to head to Croat's arena after dawn. Before departure, Amaya was suspicious because Luther had not shown up. She had someone search for him, but he couldn't be found. Little did she know Negan had already disposed of Luther's body. At this moment, he deliberately mentioned that Luther had disagreed with this plan yesterday, hinting to everyone that Luther might have chosen to separate from the main group. Tommaso thought that the more they delayed, the greater the chance that Croat would figure out their plan. After all, Luther was an adult and could make his own decisions. As they were packing, both Maggie and Negan seemed preoccupied. Neither of them told the truth. Negan remained silent about Luther's death, and Maggie didn't tell him that she had found Jinny's dinosaur toy. Interestingly, Negan asked Maggie if she had seen his matchbox. Of course, Maggie wouldn't tell him that she had used the matches to burn the toy. The weather was somewhat gloomy, causing the vast Manhattan to show its post-apocalyptic state to the fullest. A few shaky zombies moved through the streets. Near them was a subway entrance, which, according to Tommaso, led to a secret passage to the arena. Just downstairs, the alert Maggie noticed that bubbles were emerging from the sewer. Tommaso told her that it was all methane. At this time, Negan didn't know that Jinny was not far away. The group entered the dark underground passage. Since there were some zombies lying on the ground, they had to be careful with every step. After going through the horde of zombies without much incident, they arrived at a prison cell where prisoners were held. Here, Maggie saw a little boy tied to a chair, about the same age as Herschel. He had turned into a zombie, which made Maggie tense. She feared that the boy might be Herschel. Maggie didn't dare to go forward to check. Negan went up and confirmed that it wasn't her son. Now, they were getting closer and closer to Croat's location. Amaya started to plan their strategy. She asked Maggie to find a car, and Negan's main task was to lure Croat to the garage. Then, they would get into the car that Maggie had prepared in advance and escape to the other side of the city. After luring Croat out of the arena, Amaya and the others would take down Croat. After explaining the plan, Amaya and the others went to find a place to hide. Before Maggie and Negan succeeded, they needed to make sure they wouldn't be discovered by Croat's people. Maggie pulled out the matchbox from her pocket, intending to tell Negan about the dinosaur toy. But at that moment, Maggie found Luther's candy box in Negan's pocket. Negan wanted to explain, but was interrupted by her. The urgent task at hand was to act swiftly. Nothing else mattered. Over at Croat's side, he was in the studio instructing a girl on how to play a CD. The girl seemed terrified. From their conversation, it's revealed that years ago, the girl and a group of survivors had been hiding in a fire station. But in the end, everyone who refused to join Croat died, except for the girl. Croat called her a loyal guardian, gave her a candy to ease her fear, and left. A familiar whistle sounded nearby. Excited, Croat picked up his coat and went to investigate. Just by the melody, he knew it was his old friend, Negan. After Croat left, the girl did as instructed and inserted the CD into the player. The music would automatically start playing after 5 minutes. Maggie reached the garage and found a suitable car. Just as she was about to start the car, she spotted Jinny, who held some hostility towards Maggie because she burned her toy, and she ran off as soon as she saw Maggie. Out of guilt, Maggie left the car and chased after her. According to the original plan, when Negan arrived at the garage, Maggie was supposed to take him away, but Jinny's appearance disrupted the plan. When Negan led Croat to the garage, Maggie was nowhere to be found. Seeing the tools left in the car, Negan guessed that the plan had changed. He had no choice but to hide in the car. Croat's men started to arrive one after another. Negan realized it was now impossible to lure him out alone. Maggie chased Jinny to the arena lobby where she coincidentally met up with Amaya's team. Strangely, there was no one else there. As everyone was confused, the 5-minute countdown ended and a loud symphony suddenly started playing. Only then did they realize they had fallen into a trap. Croat had prepared early, planning to catch all the intruders in one fell swoop. Little did they know, candles at both entrances of the building were burning that would eventually ignite the underlying methane system. A massive explosion shattered the glass doors at the entrances. Countless zombies, attracted by the music, instantly flooded in to flex their ugly figures. Croat's plan was meticulous. At this point, Negan realized that their plan had completely failed. Now they could only wait for Croat and his men to leave and then find a way to escape. But Croat was a madman. He didn't order all his men to evacuate the soon-to-be overrun building. Instead, he left 2 of his men behind with him. Rather than escaping, he wanted to meet Negan. After leaving the car, Negan hid in the place where the methane was produced. Despite the stormy circumstances, he remained calm. In contrast, the situation in the lobby was dangerous. Zombies kept closing in, and the trapped few could only fight hand-to-hand. Soon, casualties began to fall. Maggie fought fiercely with the zombies, but was overwhelmed by their sheer number. More devastating was that even the strong Tommaso was at a loss. He asked Amaya for help, but it was too late. Tommaso was dragged into the center of the horde, his fate unknown. Continuing to fight like this, they would eventually be worn down. Maggie thought of Herschel. To save her son, she could not die here. As the zombies moved, Maggie spotted an escape route. Just as she was about to rush over, she saw Jinny hiding in the duel field. Maggie couldn't abandon her, so she signaled to Amaya and the scavenger, and the 4 of them hid inside, locking the door behind them. They finally got a moment to catch their breath, but the battle was far from over. Whenever a zombie approached, they had to eliminate it promptly. However, they were heavily outnumbered, and their situation wasn't promising. If the zombies broke through the wire fence, they would be doomed. Maggie had a flash of insight. She urged everyone to remove the wooden planks nailed to the wire fence. Then the 4 of them formed a line, trying to use the planks as shields to get through the zombies. However, an unexpected incident occurred. The scavenger on the right was grabbed by a zombie and was taken away for meals. Amaya, on the left, soon faced similar danger. In the nick of time, Tommaso unexpectedly appeared and defused the crisis. To everyone's surprise, he hadn't died. Under his lead, they found an unlocked room and quickly sought refuge inside. The room was filled with metal cans, but soon they could hear the sound of zombies pounding on the door. For safety, they used a large red metal can to block the door. The zombies couldn't get in, but that also meant that the people inside couldn't get out. Maggie deduced from a sign on the wall that the entrance to the sewer was behind the metal can. She and Tommaso quickly moved the can, but Amaya thought this was too dangerous. Besides zombies, the sewer also contained high concentrations of methane gas, making it impossible for them to breathe. However, Maggie and Tommaso were determined. They were surrounded by death anyway, so they decided to fight for their lives. On Negan's side, the cunning Croat had discovered his trail. Negan climbed up the stairs and Croat quickly followed. They finally came face to face. When they reached the overpass, they stopped. Croat was delighted to meet his old friend, and although Negan held a crossbow, Croat knew him well enough and put down his weapons without hesitation. He then told him that he was not going to seek revenge from him, claiming that he had heard about Negan's battle with another survivor group, and knew Negan had lost to that group and was subsequently imprisoned. Croat expressed that if Negan hadn't banished him, the outcome might have been different. He wanted Negan to join him. Although the Saviors no longer existed, he had established a new sanctuary. He believed that if they worked together, they could build a stronger world. By then, the whole of Manhattan Island would be their refuge. Croat assumed that Negan was looking for Pearly. In a show of goodwill, he had his men bring Pearly over, proposing that if Negan joined him, he could do whatever he wanted with Pearly. Clearly, Croat was mistaken. The person Negan was really looking for was Herschel, Maggie's son. Croat was puzzled and wondered what Maggie could have possibly done to enchant him. Negan didn't bother to explain. He simply demanded that Herschel be handed over. Croat neither agreed nor declined. Instead, he suggested that Negan come over and have a proper discussion with him. Negan was cautious and didn't act rashly. Seeing this, Croat threw Pearly from a great height in frustration, but Pearly was quick and managed to catch hold of a railing. Negan tried to pull Pearly up, but Croat shot an arrow at Pearly's thigh. Pearly, desperate to survive, pulled out his sword. With Negan's help, he managed to take shelter in a nearby store. However, Pearly did not express gratitude for Negan saving his life and took advantage of Negan's distraction to steal his crossbow. Officer Pearly justified his action by citing the criminal code, stating that intentional homicide is first-degree murder and that offenders should be punished 5 times. Negan was rendered speechless. Being unarmed, he had no choice but to surrender. Maggie and Amaya's rescue mission ended in failure. To avoid being surrounded by zombies, the 4 of them had no choice but to venture into the foul-smelling sewer. Tommaso was the first to enter it. Seeing Amaya's worry, he reassured her with a kiss on her hand. After the recent series of adventures, Jinny's attitude towards Maggie had noticeably changed. She obediently climbed down the ladder. Maggie, bringing up the rear, put the metal can back in its original position and then carefully descended. Rotting zombies were everywhere, their decomposition continually producing methane gas. They hadn't gone far when they saw a pile of fat from zombies several meters high. Tommaso went to investigate and found that it had obviously been done by Croat's men. Deep in the sewer, Tommaso found 2 oxygen tanks, temporarily solving the lack of oxygen. But when Tommaso signaled for Maggie to take oxygen, she not only refused, but gave Tommaso a strange look. Amaya couldn't figure out how Croat knew about their plan. Tommaso guessed that Luther must have betrayed them and informed Croat, but Amaya didn't think so, as there was no benefit for Luther to do this. At that point, Maggie started to suspect Tommaso. If he hadn't mentioned the secret passage, they wouldn't have come in. Plus, Tommaso's familiarity with the escape route was suspicious. Tommaso claimed that he had been tortured by Croat and had escaped along this route. Maggie did not think it was that simple and suspected that Tommaso had made a deal with Croat. She kept questioning him. Why did he take off his backpack before finding the oxygen tanks? Tommaso didn't explain, but asked Amaya to trust him. However, Maggie publicly exposed him. It turned out that the oxygen tanks were not found here, but Tommaso had put them in his backpack and brought them in secretly. Tommaso finally revealed that he didn't believe he could reclaim their former home from Croat. He didn't care about anyone else. As long as he and Amaya survived, that was all that mattered. It seemed Tommaso indeed had betrayed everyone. The atmosphere was a bit awkward, but the current priority was to leave the sewer as soon as possible. They hadn't gotten very far when a heap of corpses blocked their path. As they tried to move them, Maggie started to feel dazed due to inhaling too much methane. Painful memories of the past resurfaced once more. Her husband constantly relived his death by a gunshot to the head in Maggie's memories. As Maggie was about to pass out, Tommaso took her aside to rest. Unbeknownst to them, danger was lurking nearby. A hand slowly emerged from the pile of the dead. Tommaso revealed to Maggie that his escape story wasn't made up. He almost succeeded back then, but he didn't expect Croat to have him tracked. To save his life, he had to reveal his hiding place. Croat promised Tommaso that if he led the camp's survivors to him, he would give him a boat to some refuge on the mainland. There were schools, farmland, and enough space to survive. But Maggie wondered if it was referring to the new hilltop settlement. Suddenly, Amaya's scream echoed. An ugly zombie tried to grab and attack her sexy body. Tommaso rushed to help, but was caught off guard by another zombie falling to the ground. More and more zombies woke up. Maggie swiftly drew her knife, slashing through the zombies as she tried to save Amaya, but it was too late. By the time Maggie found Amaya, she had been bitten and killed to meet the zombie lord. Tommaso, while fighting off zombies, was bitten on the neck rather than on his bald head. As blood gushed from his wound, he finally realized he had messed everything up. With endless regret, Tommaso closed his eyes to enjoy his demise. Now the remaining Maggie and Jinny fell into great danger. Fortunately, Maggie always found a glimmer of hope in despair. She led Jinny in search of a way out. Maggie also guessed that Jinny might already know about the dinosaur toy, so she explained that Croat not only robbed the new hilltop of food, but also took her son. Negan was key to saving Herschel, and they couldn't afford to distract him. After all, knowing Negan's personality, if he knew Jinny was nearby, he would definitely go find her first. In any case, Maggie hoped Jinny could understand. She was doing what she had to. Hearing this, Jinny seemed to show her understanding. As they moved forward, they encountered another pile of corpses. After carefully climbing over, Maggie saw the exit on the left. As she prepared to go, she accidentally stepped into a zombie's body. Before she could pull it out, the previously silent sewer echoed with the roar of zombies. Maggie threw her backpack to Jinny, telling her to climb up the ladder. Zombies were getting closer, and Maggie's leg was stuck in the zombie's smelly part. When the zombie came face to face, she was shocked to see a terrifying zombie hybrid, which seemingly composed of several zombies, incredibly large. The zombie hybrid pounced on Maggie, but she had nowhere to run. Even more horrifying was that zombie heads kept emerging from beneath its skin. Everyone knows that a zombie can only die by a headshot, but there were just too many heads for the bullets. Having no choice, Maggie had to break them one by one like whack-a-mole. Luckily, although the zombie looked terrifying, its combat power was quite average. After the ordeal, Maggie was bathed in sweat. Before she could catch her breath, a mist head suddenly jumped out to ambush her. Fortunately, Maggie was quick and sent it off with a swift slash. After escaping, Maggie climbed up the ladder, ready to rendezvous with Jinny. However, the child had already run off. Before Jinny left, she wrote "liar" in zombie blood on the wall, a message for Maggie. It turns out on the night they left the new hilltop, Jinny found their grain storage. There was still a lot of food left. Apparently, Maggie had lied to her. Croat had not taken all the food, but it was true that Herschel had been captured. Before leaving, Croat gave Maggie a piece of paper. It was a warrant for Negan. Maggie was forced to strike a deal with Croat to exchange Negan for Herschel. This was the real reason she sought Negan and came to Manhattan. On Negan's side, he rescued Officer Pearly from Croat, but unexpectedly Pearly turned against him. In his view, no matter what Negan did, it could not offset his crime of killing. Pearly took Negan captive, and on their way to the dock, they encountered a wave of zombies. Pearly was injured in the leg and had limited mobility, so they hurriedly hid in a nearby building. However, the iron door was locked. But the clever Negan discovered they could enter the building through a side refrigerator. Inside, it was eerily quiet. A weird piece of art caught Negan's attention, a doll disassembled and reassembled. This bizarre style was not something a normal person would do. They came to a room where a body sat on a chair, a large axe lodged in its head. This scene reminded Pearly of what he had seen in an apartment before, so he urged Negan to leave quickly. Along the way, Negan pushed a captured zombie towards Pearly, then seized the opportunity to escape. Pearly, holding a crossbow, had no big issues dealing with the zombie. Negan tried to pry open a board nailed to a door, but the process was not smooth. Pearly caught up, shot a crossbow bolt, and with a strong pull, the door opened. Dealing with the zombie had cost Pearly a lot of energy. He sat on the stairs, panting heavily. Negan couldn't bear to leave him, so he proposed a deal. As long as Pearly didn't capture him anymore, he would lead him out. Pearly didn't respond, but Negan still helped him leave the building. They found a school bus on the street and broke into the door to hide. Before the disaster, Negan was a gym teacher, so it wasn't surprising that he knew there was a first aid kit on the bus. After treating the wounds, Pearly began to share his brother's story. From childhood, Pearly always looked up to his brother as his role model. However, the brother later became an addict. One night, their mother tried to take his stash, but a high brother attacked her. This greatly disappointed Pearly, leading him to think that such a brother deserved to be abandoned. 3 years later, when the zombie crisis broke out, everything happened too fast. Pearly didn't take his brother with him, but escaped to the mainland with his parents in time. It turned out the letter Croat found on Pearly was actually written by Pearly's brother, their last contact. After the disaster, the brother wrote to ask Pearly for help, but Pearly didn't respond in time. In the end, his brother was trapped in the completely fallen Manhattan, dying alone. Whenever Pearly thinks about this, he regrets it. Although his brother had many problems, he thought he didn't deserve such a fate. Pearly confessed that although he captured Negan for justice, in reality, he was just seeking peace of mind. He upheld the belief that those who broke the law must face the judgment of the law. Over at Croat's side, he arrives at a grand theater in his car after Negan's departure. There live another group of survivors, seemingly living in pleasure, playing the piano and singing songs. Croat encounters a plump woman at the door of a room. Judging by her attire, she is likely a service staff. Despite her low status in the theater, she presents herself arrogantly in front of Croat. Pushing open the door, a blonde woman appears. She is the person Croat is here to see. No wonder Croat holds no status here. It turns out that this woman is the real power holder on Manhattan Island and the one who truly desires Negan. Upon learning that Negan has escaped, the woman becomes furious. Croat then presents a medal indicating that Negan and an officer named Pearly are together and they could never leave the island. The woman's background is still unclear, but Croat shows her utmost respect. She goes through great lengths to capture Negan alive, possibly recognizing some of his unique talents. In the sewer, Jinny successfully shakes off Maggie and manages to escape from Croat's arena. Although Jinny can't speak, she seems to have guessed Maggie's real intentions. To quickly reunite with Negan, she fires a pink flare into the night sky. Almost simultaneously, Negan, who is sitting in the school bus, and the just-escaped Maggie see it. Jinny's move is risky. While telling Negan her location, she puts herself in danger. After seeing the flare, Negan quickly moves towards the launch location. Unexpectedly, he finds not Maggie, but Jinny. Negan excitedly hugs Jinny and asks her why she didn't stay safely in the hilltop settlement and instead came to this dangerous place. Just then, Maggie also arrives. Worried that Jinny might reveal her real purpose, Maggie nervously explains that Jinny just wanted to be with Negan. Regardless, Negan is still angry. He can't protect both Maggie and Jinny. It's not safe for Jinny to stay here. Seeing Negan's emotional state, Pearly steps forward, offering to escort Jinny back to the hilltop, while Negan continues doing what he needs to do. Jinny, fearing Negan will leave her again, immediately clings to Negan. She knows Maggie wants to use Negan to exchange for Herschel from Croat. But to force Jinny to leave, Negan reveals a secret. He had killed Jinny's father, who was one of the 5 men who had tormented Negan's wife. After learning that he had a daughter, Negan, out of guilt, found the farm and kept the lonely Jinny by his side. Essentially, Jinny is a debt he wishes to repay. These words hit hard, leaving Jinny stunned, stepping back involuntarily. Her tear-filled eyes are full of confusion and despair. In the end, she runs away. Of course, Pearly knows Negan's predicament and quickly follows to ensure Jinny's safe return to the hilltop. After dawn, Maggie and Negan hide in a building, closely monitoring the situation in the arena across the street. Maggie says her impression of New York isn't the Statue of Liberty, but the Macy's department store in Manhattan. As a child, she always dreamt of visiting Macy's to find Santa Claus. Now, Macy's is not far away, but everything has drastically changed. As they talk, a car quickly drives by. They rush to the rooftop to observe, realizing that the car is heading towards the smoking building. It's clear that the driver is Croat, returning from the Grand Theater. On the way, Negan seems to sense something amiss. He remembers the way Jinny looked at Maggie the night before and her hesitation to say something. So he asks what really happened between them in the sewer. Maggie can only beat around the bush, but one glance from Negan and he understands the guilt in her eyes. In the silent exchange, Maggie realizes she can't hide the truth anymore. She quickly pulls out a dagger and aims for Negan's abdomen, but Negan is prepared. He grabs her, uses his stinky foot to send her flying like a fat bird into a cabinet. The dagger in Maggie's hand is knocked away, but she swiftly pulls out another one, aiming for Negan again. Unarmed, Negan doesn't want to engage with her and quickly runs away. Ironically, he runs into a horde of zombies. He begins to kill the zombies bare-handedly. He grabs their clothes and smashes them against a pillar without human mercy. After dealing with a few nuisances, he clambers over the railing and quickly moves across a crossbeam. However, Maggie refuses to give up and chases after him. Negan reaches a steel platform and realizes that he's cornered. He waits for Maggie calmly, stating that he could overpower her but doesn't want to harm her. He hopes Maggie will back off, but she persists, gripping her dagger and charges at him again. Negan dodges her sexy attacks and Maggie misses twice, losing her balance. Negan seizes the opportunity, grabs her arm and throws her heavy body back, causing her to nearly fall off the platform and into the horde of screeching zombies below. Negan doesn't take advantage of her vulnerable state. Instead, he stands still, watching as Maggie picks herself up. Clearly, he doesn't want to kill her. With a horde of zombies beneath him, he tries to calm Maggie down, telling her it doesn't have to end like this. However, Maggie, desperate to save her son, doesn't listen. Once she's back on her feet, she charges at Negan again. Unable to retreat in time, he gets stabbed in the shoulder. Negan, in pain, slaps her arm away and kicks her down onto the cargo below. He then pulls out his knife and jumps down. Maggie tries to retaliate, but Negan beats her to it, holding his knife against her throat. He is disappointed by Maggie's betrayal, seeing her teaming up with Croat to trap him as irrational. But Negan also knows that Maggie did this because she can't let go of her past resentment. In the midst of their conversation, Croat arrives with his men. Maggie seizes the opportunity when Negan is distracted to subdue him. Croat and his group then take Negan away in their vehicle. On their journey, Croat shares the story of his journey up to this point. Initially, he had set out to find Negan, even visiting the old Savior's outpost, but the place had long been deserted. Later on, he met a former Savior. Unexpectedly, from him, Croat learned about the tangled history between Negan and Maggie. This gave him the idea to use Maggie to his advantage. Triumphantly, Croat declares that Negan now belongs to him. Maggie was shocked to hear that. Croat assures her not to worry, as his only target from the beginning has been Negan. The group arrives at an abandoned bank vault where Herschel is being kept. Croat proves to be a man of his word, agreeing to let Maggie take her son and leave. At this point, Negan seems to have accepted his fate. He has only one request, that Maggie takes care of Jinny. After stating this, Negan willingly walks towards Croat, completing the exchange for Herschel. As for Maggie, she decides to let go of the past and start anew. However, she still finds herself stuck in a quagmire of pain, vacillating between the past and the present. Meanwhile, after escorting Jinny to the hilltop, Pearly discovers that Jinny has left her checkered shirt in the car. This is Negan's shirt. Jinny doesn't take the shirt with her in the end, signifying that her relationship with Negan has ultimately changed due to her own father's murder. Upon returning to New Babylon, Officer Pearly faces the problem of explaining Negan's disappearance. No sign of him alive or dead. Pearly chooses not to tell the truth, instead claiming that Negan was killed in the capture process. His colleagues cheer at the news. However, after hearing Pearly's account, his superior remarks that it's a pity Negan wasn't publicly hanged, as it would have served as a deterrent. On his way back, Pearly had seen 3 zombies hanging in the park, likely the superior's idea. She tells Pearly that during his absence, she often took the time to visit his 3 daughters. Pearly perceives the veiled threat in her words. Clearly, she doesn't entirely believe his story. She lights a cigarette for Pearly, leading to a discussion about energy resources. Whether Negan is dead or alive, she frankly doesn't care. The places Pearly has visited are rich in methane fuel, and it's these energy resources that pique her interest. Maggie successfully escaped with Herschel. She had endured so much to save her son, but instead of being grateful, Herschel shocked her by saying he felt safer back there. At this, Maggie was speechless. She felt for Herschel, but her attempts to feed him were heartlessly rejected. As for the baseball cap she gave him as a gift, he showed no appreciation. Moreover, Herschel even suspected that Maggie's sole motive was to seek revenge on Negan, not to save him. Misunderstood so deeply by her son, Maggie was in deep pain. Looking at the dilapidated Statue of Liberty in the distance, Maggie thought of Negan's last words. Reaching the hilltop fort by nightfall, Maggie went to check on Jinny, but she was already asleep. Then, she went to Herschel's room. Maggie said that since the apocalypse, survivors had to rob each other to stay alive. Maggie tried hard to regain what she had lost, but often ended up losing something more important. Although Maggie didn't know what to do yet, she promised her son she would focus more on her family in the future. She also promised to settle everything between her and Negan. Meanwhile, Croat was planning to take Negan to meet someone. During the drive, Croat reminisced about the saviors visiting the seaside community twice. At that time, Negan was like a rock star, charming and shining brightly. From that moment, Croat, who had just joined the Saviors, aspired to be like Negan. Such was his damn charisma. However, although Croat successfully emulated Negan's exterior, his core was utterly different. As a fervent follower of Negan, Croat understood why they had a falling out. He took the initiative to reflect on the past, believing he should not have disobeyed Negan's order to kill an innocent girl. He promised that if he encountered such a situation in the future, he would not repeat his actions. It was clear that Croat was trying his best to win Negan over. The two arrived at the theater where Croat revealed his true intentions of wooing Negan. Their battles against other communities on the island and rooting out traitors within their own team were all steps to prepare for an impending war. The real power holder of Manhattan Island is Dama. In her eyes, once she fully controls the island, civil conflicts are inevitable. So when Dama heard about Negan's glorious past from Croat, she was convinced that he was the talent she needed most. Croat was overjoyed and wanted to introduce Negan to Dama in a grand manner. However, awkwardly enough, before he could finish his sentence, Dama dismissed him. It was her private time with Negan. Dama admired Negan's political talents. Besides, self-confidence and fearlessness are qualities essential for a perfect leader. Dama hoped that Negan could lend her a hand in the upcoming battle. It turned out that while New Babylon had set its sights on methane energy, Dama had already noticed. She had heard that wherever there was energy, there were those people. They were like sneaky hyenas, plundering everywhere. Although she had the loyal Croat by her side, he was not as good at management as Negan. Only someone like Negan was qualified to be her second in command. Dama pulled out a set of keys. If Negan agreed, he would return to the peak and become the new ruler. Such a good thing, Negan had no reason to refuse, but Dama only gave out one key as Negan's entry ticket. If he wanted more, Negan had to prove his loyalty with practical actions. Afterwards, Negan used the key to open a small box. Inside was surprisingly a severed toe. It belonged to Herschel. Dama had long seen Negan's guilt towards Herschel, so she used this to threaten Negan to serve her. Otherwise, what she would cut off from Herschel next wouldn't be as simple as a toe. The drama ends with Maggie finding some strange drawings in Herschel's room, including a portrait of Dama. It seemed that her son had been heavily brainwashed by Dama during his capture. Otherwise, he wouldn't say that he felt safer with her. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.